So the Gospels then would qualify as eyewitness. Even Luke and Mark, you would suggest.
Well, and there are people who will argue that there are some areas of civil law, for example, where these could be included as a. But I'm not going to argue that. I'm just going to say, look, this is how I start my cases. I get a notebook. As a matter of fact, I've got several sitting behind me here from cases I've had over the years. And this big notebook is red because it's an unsolved. I open it up, and there are usually a number of, there's the crime report, there's the death report, there's going to be a CSI report, there's going to be an autopsy, and then there are going to be a number of supplemental reports in that notebook that were taken when detectives back in the day interviewed eyewitnesses. Often, I don't have access to those eyewitnesses anymore because they've died. And there are times when I don't even have access to the report writers because they died. All I'm telling you is, how do I determine what happened 4 decades ago when I have no access to the original eyewitnesses and no access to the people who talked to them, but I do have the reports of those interviews? Would I have enough to be able to make this case, to figure out what really happened? Even if I couldn't put it in front of a jury, would I have enough so that I could have confidence that I know what happened? Well, yeah, there's a process. This is what I try to describe in cold case. Let's just be fair. If we apply that process to cold cases and we're confident that it gets us to a conclusion that we can trust, and then incarcerate someone for the rest of his life or put him on death row, why would we not be able to use that standard to determine whether our eternal future can be, rest on the information in the Gospels? I think you could apply it. What other way would you? And again, once you've worked with eyewitnesses, it does give you the protection of not having to jump to theories to explain things that you start to see in cases from just 30 years ago. I'll give you another example of this. It's often said that the authorship of certain books is, or they'll say there's more than one author because they'll see differences in either the original language or maybe in the pacing of the book or some critical element of the book that pops up and some words are used in the last half of the book that aren't used in the first half of the book. I get all that. I have cases, though. I'll give you an example of this. I had a case from years ago that was actively worked for 3 years before it went cold. In the first days of the first officer who was assigned the case, he would come back and he would either type on a typewriter. And because of the technology, if he made a small mistake, he would not necessarily, like if we make a mistake on the computer, we can rewrite the entire sentence. Right. If he made a mistake, he would say, oh, it's not perfect. He'd change a few words. He'd keep on typing. The next day, he'd go out and he'd investigate something. And then he would come back and he's in a press he would ask our secretary, can I just recite this to you? And she's on a typewriter and she's much more facile. And he's just saying what he did that day. And she's just updating the report. And she's got, it's going to sound different because she's actually more illiterate than the detective. Okay. And 3 weeks go by and he can't work anything else, but then he gets a chance to work it again. He goes back out and he does something and he comes back and now it's a different steno. This goes on for 3 years. By the time I get it, it's a 100-page report, but it was not written at one setting. And it turns out a different steno was used over the course of the 3 years. If 1,000 years goes by and a literary critic then retrieves this report, I guarantee you they will assume that there's more than one author because the technology changes over those 3 years. Different technology from the typewriter to the steno who's just repeating it. Sometimes he would record it and then he wouldn't even be there when the steno would take the recording and make it into the report. And those stenos had our permission to fix our grammatical errors. And they would. Made us look better. Right. We're good, but they made us sound better. Now, look, the same thing happens in ancient documents. We don't know how long some of these were written over time. It's clear that Paul has got a steno. He's got a scribe, a writer. In many of his reports, he mentions the name of that writer. He signs off and says, this is in my own hand. Why would he say that? Because the rest of it's not in his own hand. The rest of it is something he's either recited. Do we know how long is it also in one setting? You sound different. If I answer the same questions with you tomorrow, my answers will probably sound a little bit different, right? Even if you said, okay, let's just stop right here and pick up the second part of the conversation tomorrow, I might use different words tomorrow based on what's in my head tomorrow. If I wait 3 weeks, it's even going to be more dramatically different. So I think we just can't draw assumptions, large, overarching assumptions that would discredit the reliability of any ancient manuscript when we still have open questions about the time span in which it was written. Did he have any help as he was writing it? What kind of technology in terms of what's the surface he's writing on? What kind of ink? Does it allow for corrections? Does it allow for me to go back and back up and say that again? These are the kinds of things we have to keep in mind, even with documents that are just 30 years old. Can you imagine if we're talking about a document that's 2,000 years old?
Yeah, and you're facing persecution, and you're
You're on the run.
you don't have a flashlight to go by this. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in antiquity that
Yes.
we
Now, the
take for
question
granted today.
becomes back to that definition of inerrancy. So you're telling me then that there are documents that might have been in some way limited by the text, by the process of recording or writing, and the technology available. Why wouldn't, well, God would overcome all that, right? Well, again, I think in the end, what he wants to achieve are documents that are real and are testable and have the earmarks of reliable testimony. And I actually think that these characteristics of the ancient manuscripts are what gave me most confidence that they were actually recording something true.